go through today. But this speed is so fast that we don't know how to really predict what happens next.
No.
And if it's, people are reassured because in the past, when we've had technological disruption, we found new jobs, different jobs that used to matter, didn't matter anymore, and new jobs did. Now we're finding a place where, or the concern is that there won't be new jobs. And we'll all basically be a nation state. We'll be living off the wealth generated by the companies, which will be taxed. We won't be paying taxes because we won't have any earned income.
You can even tax the robots.
You can tax you'll tax the robots, right? You'll tax the companies that have productivity from the robots. And it's, there are countries, I think Kuwait is a country that does this with oil. Alaska does this with oil. So not a country, but a state that does this with oil. So there is reason to believe that this could happen. And I think that the change there is two parts. It's not just people won't be able to find work, but maybe they also won't want to find work because they have, in this theory, their basic needs provided for them.
Well, yeah. And then at that point, too, it would be very difficult to just consistently generate wealth if A, you're not working, but then the wealth creation comes down to owning certain systems. So it's owning the software, it's owning the robots. I think Tesla too, they talked about that robo-taxi. That was going to come out with no steering wheel, brake pedal, gas, anything. It's literally just 4 seats, and that's happening. And the question is, A, whether or not they're going to sell that to every consumer out there.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then if you owned one of those, then you could rent it out as a taxi service, and then other people could then use it, and then you would get the revenue stream from it. Or is it the case that companies like Tesla will own it and you rent it from them? Whoever owns it is going to get the wealth generation. And it's the same thing with the AI.
I think that's where it's going to be. I think the people have talked about your car doesn't do anything all day, just sits in your driveway or the parking lot here at work. And so why not just have it go make some money for you?
Right.
Which is a very, autonomous and industrious way to think about things. But it's not the way most people are going to live their lives. And I feel what's interesting about this point is that you have, these people in Silicon Valley, they're all tech heads. Some of them are people who grew up with like cyberpunk and they watched movies like The Running Man, or, they have this idea of dystopian future and they want to get on the good side of the dystopian future that they think that they are building. It's like this velvet rope that's going to drop. And then on one side, you have the wealthy. And then the other side, you have everybody else. And the wealthy aren't even paying for everybody else. They just own the businesses that pay for everybody else.
Yeah, it's literally just people renting and using services provided to them by them.
Sure.
And that's what it is. It just all comes down to ownership. And I think it's going to be very difficult if this world comes to be. I think it's very difficult to grow and scale wealth if you don't own assets.
Once you're out, you're out.
Right. It's just like real estate, you look at like the price of real estate that's gone up so much in the last few years, makes it very difficult for young people coming out of college who are already strapped with student loan debt to go on and find a mortgage and to buy a really expensive place. It's very hard to justify that over just renting.
Yeah. I'll say right off the bat, I don't believe that's going to be the case.
I don't believe it either. I don't. Like, I think people are creatures of habit, and people naturally are competitive. I'll say that this country is capitalistic, which is good or bad, one way or the other. And I think with people being habit driven, I find it hard to believe that even if there is a universal basic income, that people won't want to strive for more.
I feel like in general, if you believe that the universe is always expanding, and so as like components of the universe, we are essentially doing the same thing. And this country is essentially built on the idea that you can push and grow and get essentially more. Then yeah, I don't know what necessarily changes that in the DNA of the people. But I do think that the opportunity can be limited. I mean, this is why people are like, well, we have to go to space now. We got to go colonize Mars. There's no opportunity here on Earth.
Yeah, it's all gone.
Everybody's always very extreme. But I think we should talk a little bit about the Gilded Age because I think that's actually the best representation historically or comparison to where we are right now. People have been talking about the tech bubble and the internet, et cetera. But if you look at the Gilded Age and the evolution of the railroad, electricity, you had this massive wealth generation for the robber barons, right? The Carnegies and et cetera, the
Rockefellers, yeah.
Rockefellers. And it really did feel like you were in or you were out. And those are the people that had the fancy houses and they had the servants and they had the electricity that not everybody got to have. And they owned the railroads. And the people who saw that and said, I want to be a Rockefeller would get washed out in a crash, like the 1907. Like there'd be a crash where only the strongest survived. And there were people who were proud of this. Like Carnegie wrote a book about like how to be wealthy. And it was essentially like, own it. By the way, you can't because we already own it all.
Right.
The game Monopoly was basically built, like designed about this. It was, right? You have to just race to own everything before everybody else. That's how you win the game. And if you don't, then you're a loser.
You suck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. But you can also see that too with the different generations of even people that we work with. The younger clients that we work with aren't in a race to own everything. I feel like the younger people we work with, and we've talked about this before, are in a rush for experiences or are trying to get freedom.
Yeah.
Versus, I think the idea of ownership is also the idea for the younger generation of being tied down. Versus on the flip side, if you go to the older generations that we work with, the idea of ownership is wealth. Even if you have rental properties that are cash flow negative, it is still better to own than to rent in a lot of circumstances for those particular people.
I am old enough to remember when Gen Y was never going to own houses. Like they're just like, it was not their thing. They didn't want to be tied down, blah, 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 blah. They get older. They want to own houses. This is what happens all on the way, right? Home ownership is what generations grow up to want if they don't want it when they're early.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're young, the idea of traveling the world and doing all these things and having experiences is probably top of mind for you. In the same way it was for me. I saw myself as being a vagabond in my early 20s.
Yeah.
Now I'm good with staying home every Friday and Saturday night, and I don't need to go out. I love my house and it's great.
Yep.
But I think at some point there's a mental shift with people where they do want to own.
I think it's a path, like it's a journey, and it's something that it's kind of rinse and repeat. We see it happen over and over and over again. And it even happened back in the Gilded Age because what changed from, so the Gilded Age was late 1800s into early 1900s.
Early 1900s.
Right? Yeah. Like 1910 maybe might be when it ended. On the other side of Gilded Age, you have World War I, and you have the, what was the outbreak? The flu, the Spanish flu.
Spanish flu.
Spanish flu, yeah, which was kind of like their COVID. It's not funny. It was
bad.
It was pretty bad. So on the other side of that, you had the Roaring '20s. And what changed is government intervention. So you had these robber barons and these essentially people who were the wealthiest, individuals in the country at the time and the turn of that century.
I believe that was JP Morgan too.
Yeah, Morgan was in there as well.
Yeah.
They're next wealthier than the people who are now by like inflation adjusted, right? They were just like countries in and of their own like person. Okay. And anti-monopoly, anti-business essentially came in and spread the wealth. And you needed that government intervention. People found ways to make money, to your point, that it's not that there's going to be just like a finite finish line and there's no way to make money in the future. People will find a way. And I think that's why I don't believe that this is going to happen again, because historically it didn't happen. It felt like it was going to happen and then it didn't.
Yeah. I think there are things that are so inherently ingrained in human nature that I think to just say that all goes away.
Right.
Is basically a statistical certainty that that's not going to happen. Even if robots come out and they replace a lot of the existing jobs and things like that, and we're down to an ownership scale, there will always be ways of, I don't want to say monopolizing the system, but there will be ways to grow and scale wealth. I do
Yeah.
truly believe that.
Well, I mean, so we have the Trump accounts this year,
Yeah.
right? And we have the government handing people money
Yep.
as essentially a buy-in to the market
Right.
and the type of the country that we are. So I wonder about that. Is that there to help people generate wealth? Is it there to placate people?
I don't think it's there to placate people. I don't think it would have been presented if there wasn't a core belief because it was agreed upon by basically everybody that it was a good idea.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would have been presented in general if people didn't see investing in the market and wealth creation to be a positive thing.
Do you think
And
it's happening now? Why now? Why do you think that this is finally happening now? Because we heard about it, I was like 3 or 4 years ago.
I want to say it comes down to having an excess cash flow on the balance sheet, but that's not
That's
the
definitely not it.
case. But that's not the case. Why now is probably because I think there is starting to be that Gilded Age growth disparity in regards to the upper and lower class. And if we look at the tax code changes that were recently introduced, a lot of people are like, oh, well, this is tax cuts for the rich and things like that.
Sure.
We have a lot of high earners that got hosed by these tax cuts. But when I talk to a lot of clients that are in the middle class, they benefited dramatically from them because you have much higher SALT deductions. You're able to deduct more. And that was a huge increase. You also have higher 401k catch up accounts. And now you have the Trump accounts as well. So there are benefits to the lower and middle class as well. And I think in my mind, it's trying to even the playing field a little bit more because you do see a pretty big wealth gap at the moment.
Yeah.
And it is growing, especially as markets increase. And
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing for me. I think people look at wealthy and they get upset that obviously there's this huge wealth gap that's increasing, which is valid and that's happening because what did the market do for the last 6 years? Apart from 2022, the market's gone straight up.
Yeah.
And if you're an owner of stocks, you benefited from that and now you're wealthy. But if you didn't, you're in a tough
You
spot
missed out.
compared,
Yeah. And I think that's where we've landed on these accounts as a good thing, right? But they are kind of a buy-in to the capitalistic society. That's what they are by design. Like
100%.
this is how they were pitched.
Mhm.